Hi there, welcome to AV Rant. If you're seeing this, this is the behind the scenes version. This is the live recording, heading out there live on air. So sometimes we'll be talking about images that you won't be able to see. Our audio quality might go in and out depending on how Google Hangouts handles things. That's because it's behind the scenes. We will put up a 2-hour complete version of this video all edited together. So if you're bothered by the sort of behind the scenesiness of this, wait and check out that 2-hour complete video. All right, with that, I'll switch over to Tom and we'll start the podcast.
Somebody's slamming drawers out there. It's driving me nuts. I just told them to be quiet. Just told them to be quiet. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. I did not watch the Super Bowl at all. I didn't watch any of the commercials either, so I'm clueless. I have no idea what happened this weekend.
I started a little late, so I missed the solo commercial. So I had to go watch that on YouTube.
I saw that on YouTube. I did see that one.
Yeah, the Alexa one was real good.
Okay.
Who was the dude? It was the guy who was like giving everybody advice, and it was for some Quicken. Like Quicken was everywhere on that thing. Quicken Loans and stuff like that, or Quicken. I don't remember what Intuit, whatever that thing is. They're all over the place. That was a pretty good one when he was running around giving people advice and basically telling them what stuff really meant.
Okay,
was pretty good. Yeah, that's what I got.
That's about it.
Wasn't the best. Game was good. The game was real good. I did not predict the outcome of the game at all. So that was exciting for me. Not that I cared that much, because I don't. But it was a fun game to watch. It was very exciting all the way up until the last couple of seconds, and then you're like, okay, well now we know for sure who won.
There you go.
But up until that moment, it was a very exciting game. So
all right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed it. Perhaps on gigantic new televisions that they bought.
I hope so. I had a giant. You know, it was really nice. I got mine over the air. So
yeah, of course, yeah.
I was sitting there. I was supposed to go to my brother-in-law's house. Now, I love my brother-in-law. He's a very nice guy. His family is very lovely. He's got a bitty screen. It's like 50 inches, and he sits like 12 feet away from it. It's very distracting. He's got one couch, so then behind that is their kitchen, so you can sit at like the dining room table thing, or the whatever the little bar thing is back there. But you're way too far, and they use the speakers on the TV. It's just you can't hear anything. You can't understand anything that's going on. You know, and they've got cable or something, and it's, you know, the grass macro blocks and stuff. I was really not looking forward to going over there to watch the game. I mean, I didn't really care. I was fine. I always like going over there, but if I'm gonna watch the game, I want to watch it I was getting two of my kids, but one last night wasn't feeling well, and I was like, dude, I will stay home. And so I stayed home with him, and she took the other kids over to there and came back at halftime, and right after halftime, because she wanted to see Justin Timberlake. That's who it was, right? It was Justin Timberlake.
It was Justin Timberlake. I heard some people didn't like it. I don't know why. I didn't see it. So
there was a Prince thing that apparently people are mad about. I guess he and Prince had some beef, and him attributing Prince in the whatever. I had no idea any of that stuff happened. I didn't like the fact that he looked like a dirty hobo the entire time. Or like all the clothes. I was like, dude, did you not wash them? They're so ugly. His shirt's got like a wolf or a elk on it or something. He looked awful. So but the dancing was good, and the fake singing was fine, because you know, no one's allowed to actually sing at the Super Bowl. So but other than that, whatever. It's 1,000 degrees in my house. It's the perfect temperature in Florida for it to get too hot in your house, but not hot enough for the AC to kick on. And it's February, so you feel like if you turn the AC on in February, you're some sort of too rich for his own good idiot who uses the AC. And I can't open the windows because my neighbor has a Super Bowl party. And this is the and you're saying, well, the Super Bowl was yesterday, Tom. I am aware of that. The Super Bowl party goes on for 3 days.
Gotcha.
They throw 2 parties a year. I think it's Super Bowl and maybe 4th of July. I don't remember. It's one of the, and those are the two, and they go on for days. People never leave. And then people come back like after work. They're like, I'm coming back after work. I'm like, what? There's like 30 cars outside of my house right now, and they're all in this guy's backyard partying it up and stuff. And he's a real nice guy. And we go over and do it sometimes. They usually have an oyster shucking little station if you want to go over there and shuck some oysters, which I do. I always do. But then I usually end up getting to have to shuck for a bunch of people. But it's just, I can't open my window because it's too loud. So now I'm just going to be hot and cranky and moist. I'm wearing shorts.
Well, we've got a ton of questions, so let's.
How do we have a ton of questions? We had no questions last
I don't
week.
know. I was saying before the podcast, I didn't think we had this many as they were coming in throughout the week, but it turns out we've got a lot. So we'll try.
Fine. We're not getting through them. That's fine. I'm okay with that. Let's talk about the podcast. This is the AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Goes into our question queue. We ask just about almost exclusively first in, first out. So if you don't hear your question answered on the current podcast, wait till the next one because we will answer it. We answer them all. We don't curate this list at all. You can also go to www.avrant.com. Leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/AVRant Podcast. We're very active and we actively see your question there. YouTube.com/C/AVRant, where you can leave a comment with all the rest of the people on YouTube who we do not listen to. So don't leave a comment there. If you do, hey, you know what? So you could subscribe. We do need you to subscribe to YouTube.
We do still need subscribers. Again, we got a big uptick in our subscriber number. Well, big relative for us, which was super nice to see. Thank you so much to everyone who did. We still need 170-ish more.
Oh, that's not bad.
And we'll reach it
like 500 or 600.
It's tantalizingly close. So
all right. So we got like 2 more weeks to get this done, right?
That's right. Right. So crossing my fingers, putting the plea out there again. Doesn't cost you any money if you could find some way to subscribe or create 6 more email addresses and subscribe with all of them. We just need to get to 1,000. It's all just so we can stay within YouTube's partnership program. That's all it is.
I still need to do that. My kids all have accounts. My wife has an account. I have 2 accounts, I think. So I need to go and do that. All right.
Don't be like Tom. Don't delay. Do it today.
Don't delay.
You'll feel fantastic.
You'll be doing a service for us, and
that's right,
and all that. Let me see. That's YouTube. If you want to contact us directly, Rob is rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @firstreflect. I am Tom @avrant.com. My Twitter is @avrant_Tom. We have our producer Austin. He's got his Twitter is @Austin TEN, not TIN. Fun. You know what? Right before the podcast, I wanted to send him an email. Could not remember his name. Had to do the whole spiel to get to his name, and then because of the repetition, it came to me. I swear, I sat there. I was like, "Is it Rick? No, that doesn't sound right."
What?
Dave? I just completely blanked on his name.
Wow.
I was like, it was.
I'm sure he'll be thrilled to hear that.
I'm sorry. It's just I just had this complete mind for it. I was like, well, if I'm gonna get to his name, I'm gonna have to do the whole spiel. So I did the whole spiel in my head so I could get to his name. I went, oh yeah, Austin.
Yes.
And Austin has his own podcast, the We Watch Movies podcast, a podcast about traumatic head injury and memory loss. Very topical after the. There was the big hit at the game. That guy never saw it.
Yeah, dude got cracked. I saw that.
Never saw it coming. He looked confused before it happened. He looked real confused after it happened.
Yeah, he did like a spin anyway, and then blindsided. Woo.
Yeah, he got completely blindsided. So that was unfortunate. I kind of feel like that should have been a penalty. I feel like, no matter what, that should have. They say, oh, he's not a receiver, he's a runner now. Whatever, dude. Guy got cracked and he's unconscious. Somebody should be getting 5 yards.
It was helmet to helmet. There was definite helmet to helmet contact. So
yeah. So all the best to him and his, and I'm sure they'll be talking about that this week on the We Watch Movies podcast. Traumatic head injury.
Could be.
All right, we want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you have to support the podcast in some way. One way you can support the podcast is go to www.avrant.com and click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. There will send you to a PayPal donation site. PayPal will take your information and give us the monies that you send us. Well, most of it. So we want to thank Christopher for doing that this week. So thank you, Christopher.
Yeah, Christopher, thanks so much for that donation.
Another way to donate financially to the podcast is to go to patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. Is that right?
Correct. AV Rant Podcast, all one word.
And Patreon will allow you to subscribe to a monthly donation to us, kind of like NPR or something like that, where you're like, oh, you're a sustaining member. So if you would like to support us on a monthly basis, I think the minimum is $1, which is fine. I'm perfectly fine with if we had everybody who listened to this podcast give us $1, we could maybe not stop working, but work less.
Definitely could not stop working. Definitely not. We don't have that many listeners, but it would help. It would be nice.
It would certainly be nice. Yeah. So if you want to do that, you can do that. And we want to thank Niels, who's one of our 54 patrons right now. So thank you, Niels.
Yeah, thank you, Niels, for signing up on Patreon there, and thanks so much to the 53 other patrons. We saw that number tick up once again, so that's very cool. Appreciate that.
Sorry if I ducked out of the screen there, but my water is right next to my foot. I'm going to kick it over.
It's going to get kicked.
Lastly, if you can support the podcast in some other way, you just have to let us know how you've done it. I know that we've done everything from people telling other people about it to, a lot of people, when they buy their stuff, they tell the manufacturers or the outlets that they got it because of us. So we want to thank Jeb. He ordered the Denon X4300H and 4 Focal Little Bird speakers from Accessories for Less and said it was all our fault.
That's right.
You're welcome. It's our fault. That's right.
I appreciate that, Jeb. That's very nice, and I will take the blame for that purchase because I think those are really nice products.
All right, we've got some news here. We're going to go quick. This came from one of our listeners, Chris. He says, RBH sent out the word that the next generation of the Impression Series speakers should be arriving soon. They claim to have improved cabinet design and construction while updating all of the drivers and the crossover. They're also saying that they have both gloss and non-reflective finishes options this time, and they're hoping to launch the new speakers by the end of February. So that's very exciting.
Yes, we were waiting to hear news about the new generation of RBH Impression Series speakers, so good to know they are on the way.
Yeah. Steve and Chris on Twitter, I guess a while back, LG momentarily released a firmware update that added Dolby Vision support for their UP970 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. Then they quickly took it back down. They've now released a new Dolby Vision firmware update. So check for that if you have an LG Ultra HD Blu-ray player so that you can get your Dolby Vision on.
That's right. Steve said he is testing it out and will probably write something up on his website there, Next Gen Home Theater, a place I like to go because he keeps a very up-to-date list of all the Ultra HD Blu-rays that have been released, so it's handy.
Does he actually listen to this podcast?
Oh, yes.
Does he really?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Chris. I didn't know that.
No, that's Steve.
Steve. Hey, Steve. Whoever you are. At least your name's not Rick, because I got that guy right there. Austin is very confused. All these emails addressed to Rick. That would be funny. I should start doing that. Onkyo released a Dolby Vision firmware update for their older X5X series receivers.
Well, those were like, there was like a 555, a 656, a 757, so that's how they kind of do their model numbers. Yeah.
So apparently there's a glitch that forces you to activate both the main and sub HDMI outputs if the receiver has 2 HDMI outputs, though. So otherwise, you get no output at all. But if you want to get Dolby Vision, you just have to turn the other one on. You have to plug anything into it, right? It just has to be on.
Well, you have to activate the firmware update because it's.
That's what I'm saying.
Update.
But I'm saying that you just have to. If the receiver has 2 HDMI outputs, you have to activate both of them.
Yeah, you have the option. If there are 2 HDMI outputs, there's a main and a sub. They're mirrored outputs, but you have the option of activating just one or the other or both. And he's like, for whatever reason, if you don't activate both, if you activate one or the other, it doesn't work. So yeah. That's what's going on there, but lots of Dolby Vision firmware updates, so maybe keep an eye on things. I'm hoping my SR7010 and other people's of the same year gets updated soon. I would like my Dolby Vision to pass through.
Dan opted to go with his Bose center speaker for now. Okay, so I guess Dan was the one who's got the TV that pulls down over the thing, over the fireplace.
That's correct, yeah.
So it's mounted below the TV that pulls down from above his fireplace, and it all fits quite nicely. And we have a picture here on YouTube. And you can see this is exactly what I was talking about, mounting the speaker to the TV. So I'm glad he was able to do that. So that's great.
Yeah, and it's slim enough from top to bottom that when it's in the upright position, it fits above the mantle. So
well, that's good.
Yep.
Mike decided to spend the extra money for the fiber optic HDMI cable for his greater than 50-foot HDMI cable run. He also went ahead and ran Cat 6 and a coax cable while the walls were open. Just a coax cable?
Yeah. What do you need more than one coax for?
I don't know.
Anyway, that's a good idea, I think.
Seems like you would need 3, right? Isn't coax what RCA turns into?
No, coax would be like your cable TV feed.
Oh, that one. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's the same. So anyways, doesn't make any difference. He ran ahead. He also confirmed with HD Fury that they didn't have any solution for running one source of two displays while retaining full surround sound for one of them, while the other just used the TV's built-in speakers. That seemed like such a weird limitations to Mike, but at least he knows now before he closes up his walls. Lastly, he asked SVS about recessing one of their SB4000 subs into an opening in a wall. They said it should be fine, and he shouldn't have any negative impact on the sealed sub's performance. So perhaps that info might be helpful for anyone else who's considering an in-wall subwoofer. Now, what you're saying is true. It's a sealed subwoofer. So as long as the baffle, I would like the baffle to stick out a little bit, but as long as the baffle isn't recessed, the front of the speaker is not recessed, it should be fine.
Yeah, because all sound is emanating out the front where the driver is.
Right. So there's no, so yes, I agree. I agree with what they said. Sometimes I don't always agree with what SVS says, but most of the time I do.
The vast majority of the time we do, yeah.
Yeah, they have cleaned up that website of theirs a little bit. Thank you very much. So yeah, that will work with almost any sealed sub. I mean, it should work with every sealed sub, but
it should actually be fine for most of their subs that have the driver on the front and all of the ports on the front too.
That's right. And
as long as there's no sound producing element going in,
as long as you don't have one of those weird, like the sub has like a passive radiator on one side, an active driver on the other, something like that, you should be fine. The problem is usually walls aren't that thick. Like you can't recess a sub into a wall if you're trying to put it if the wall is between two rooms, because the 90% of the subwoofer is going to be in the other room. So obviously he's got some little space room thing that he's recessing it into, I guess. It's very strange. Anyways, Byron got his projection screen, and he and his wife agree that they just had the best movie experience ever, including every visit to a full-size cinema. He says they got into home theater 10 years ago because of us, and it all started with a 32-inch CRT and some computer speakers. Now it's a 120-inch screen with SVS Ultra speakers, Atmos, and 4 subs. So yeah, it's a slippery slope. That's all I'm going to say.
A little bit of a difference there, but hey, over the course of 10 years, that sounds perfectly reasonable to me.
That sounds like a perfectly reasonable number of speakers to have. He also wanted to note they wound up sitting between 10 and 11 feet away. 9 feet looked impressive at first, but they had to move their eyes to take in the whole image, so a little farther back was more relaxing. That also let him put his front left and right speakers at exactly 30, plus or minus 30 degrees, and the soundstage seemed perfect to him now, but most shocking, in this rectangular room, he ended up only using 2 subwoofers. His theater is shifted over to the left of the room, so with a subwoofer next to his right front speaker, it is basically in the middle of the front wall. Putting a second subwoofer in the back of the middle of the back wall resulted in bass that was on point. And using his other 2 subwoofers actually made things sound worse than when he set them up to look symmetrical. And repositioning them for best sound really wasn't any better than just 2 subs. So now he gets to put a sub in the living room and one in the bedroom. That seems like a reasonable thing to do as far as I'm concerned. That's right.
Hey, man, if your theater does not require them, let's spread the wealth of all those subwoofers
that's exactly
around the house.
But I say this quite often in this podcast, and I know Rob's like, if you go for 4 sub, go for 4. And that's true. But the reality is the difference in how it sounds over 2 is not nearly the difference that you get from going from 1 to 2. So
yes, 1 to 2 is a massive change, and plus 1 row of seating, and it's really only a couch and 2 people.
Right.
So chances are you can probably get pretty darn good results with 2 people or with 2 subs. And like I say, in a rectangular room, that's the big difference. His last room, it wasn't a rectangle, and he had like openings to other parts of the house. And he found he kind of needed more than 2 subs to get it all sounding even and uniform and linear without any big dips in it. So the room makes a massive, massive difference to what you need.
All right, let's get into these questions here. Dave, Rob mentioned that his new OLED TV was refurbished. Dave wonders, how does refurbishing work when it comes to TVs? Where was the TV before it was refurbished? What do refurbished products come from in general? And why do they need to be refurbished? Are parts being replaced? Repairs being done? ... Okay. Yes, all of what you said is true. A lot of times, a refurbished just means returned.
A lot of times, yes.
So what happened is somebody got it, took it out of the box, put it up on their wall and said, this is not big enough, or this is too big, or we can't afford this, or I just wanted it for the Super Bowl, and now that the Super Bowl's over, I'm sending it back. Okay. What that means is that they can no longer sell it as new. So a refurbished unit in many cases is just a returned unit that can no longer be sold for new. So they take a hit on their profits and are able to then sell it to you for a cheaper price, but at least they can sell it to you rather than it, I guess, throwing it away, which would be the other option. Sometimes it can be scratch and dent stuff. A lot of times that's what I find refurbished are. They are in shipping. This they dropped it, and or they dropped something on it and there's a little nick on it, or the Best Buy was selling it and they went to go install it and they nicked the corner of something, or they got a little scrape on it. I mean, I've been in like the refurbished like kitchen places, where it's like refrigerators and stuff, and you'll see it what it is. It's got a gash on the side where something fell on it or something, and they're like, I can't sell it new anymore because nobody's gonna want to buy a brand new thing. Look, that literally is gonna, I mean, so refrigerators, that part is never gonna be seen in my house, at least. So what do I care if it's got a gash on it? I'm like, give it to me for 60% off, which sometimes is what it is. So that's a lot. Now, are there repairs? Sometimes. If something is sent back for repairs, it usually it's sent back to the manufacturer, not always, but usually it's sent back to the manufacturer. The manufacturer goes through it, tests it, certifies that it's in 100% working order, and then ships it out to a company like Accessories for Less to sell for them. And if it's certified and it's got its warranty, who cares?
Yeah, the place I got my television from, tvoutlet.ca, right on their website, under their, sort of about us thing, they say tvoutlet.ca electronics are customer returns, open boxed, or reconditioned electronics directly from the factory. So that sort of explains where they get their stock from. So exactly the sort of things we're talking about. And then Accessories for Less has a further description. So right from their website, every product has been thoroughly tested, repaired if necessary, cleaned, and otherwise renewed to original condition. Next, it's repackaged with original accessories included. And that's kind of an important thing, because sometimes you can get an open box that's missing the remote, or a lot of times they don't have the instructions included if that was there. Normally, when you're getting one that's called refurbished, it means they've repackaged it with original accessories, if not the very same ones as when it was brand new. Then they've included whatever was necessary.
Right.
Furthermore, they say all electronics manufacturers receive product returns for various reasons. For whatever reason, 2011 is the year they had this. I guess that's when they wrote it. Consumers returned $17 billion in electronics globally, of which less than 5% were found to be defective. So that's where the whole, how are they repaired or are parts being replaced? Not very often. Usually it's just customer return, open box. Once a product has been opened, it must be resold as refurbished, or and it can't be resold as new again. The history and reason why a product is returned is not provided to us in the case of Accessories for Less. I couldn't find out exactly why mine ended up being a refurbished product either, so that's not sort of standard.
I thought you said was there a scuff on the back of the TV?
Yeah, there was a scuff on the back where it was wall mounted at one point and then taken down, and there was a little scuff right by one of the mounting holes, which if I wall mount it will be covered up.
That's right. And if you don't wall mount it, it'll be against the wall anyway.
That's right.
How many TVs do you see sitting in the middle of rooms? It doesn't happen that often.
Again, for saving about $1,500 plus whatever the tax would have been, I'll take that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Give me your scuffs. Carl. Oh, geez. It starts just like the other one.
That's right.
Now that Rob has an OLED TV, everybody focus on Rob today. Will he ever consider using a projector again?
I sure will. When I have a much larger room and sit farther than about 6.5 feet away from my TV, I will definitely consider a projector.
Yeah, if I was sitting that close, I would definitely have a direct view TV as well. I mean, that close, you can just get,
No, I can get the field of view I want from ideally my TV size would be 70 inches, but they don't really make many in 70 inches anymore, and they don't make OLEDs in that size, and to go up to 77 inches is like a massive jump in price.
Right.
So I will take the 65 and be just fine with that at my very short seating distance in my teeny tiny apartment room.
So what's our assessment of the value proposition between projectors and large flat panels these days? It seems to Carl that once you go above 65 inches, flat panels can quickly get more expensive than some really amazing projectors. Mm-hmm. You are right, sir. Yes.
I would agree.
But that 65 inches has gotten a lot bigger in the last not so many years. Last 5 years. I mean, 50, it used to be, if you wanted to get something above 55 inches, you had to shell out the big bucks. But we're up to 65 and I think very quickly approaching 75 as well. Mm-hmm. Will we ever get to a 120-inch flat panel display? The answer to that question is almost certainly no, because how are you going to get it into the house? Like, I mean, that's going to be like the biggest problem is like if we can't roll it up like a OLED, those whatever, it's just never going to happen. But I agree, and that's why we do it. We do it because once you get to a certain size, you're like, it's cheaper to get a projector. And so much so more now that we've got inexpensive screens, because not projectors. Even 10 years ago, you could find a $1,200, $1,500 projector. May not have been the best quality, may not have all the features, may not be the quietest, but you could find a real good one for $1,200, $1,500. That was a doable thing, even 10 years ago. Definitely under $2,000, and under $2,000 for a TV at that time would have given you about 55 inches. So it just made sense. But the screens back then were just ridiculous. Like getting an inexpensive screen. I mean, the screens were as much as the flat panels almost. They're like $1,000 for some of these screens.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you think like Karada, who is not even in business anymore. They're just completely gone at this point. I mean, they were considered like really inexpensive at one point, and if they were still around today, they'd be considered kind of expensive versus what's out there now. So,
it's unfortunate, but and so now that we have these inexpensive screens that we can get, I mean, $100, $200 for a fixed frame, large 90, 100-inch screen, pull down screens or drop screens that are like $500. That's a motorized screens are like $500. That's insane. That's insane. Man, the screen that I had, my first screen, the one that I got when I was with Audioholics, we ordered it, and it was a custom job because I had a very specific, size I needed, but it was like a $2,000 screen. Yeah. It was tab tensioned and everything, but it was $2,000. I would never have bought a $2,000 tab tension screen. You would have lost your minds, right? But now we can get something like that for. I mean, what can we get tab tension for now?
Tab tensioned?
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm not sure on the very least expensive.
What do you think, around $500, $600?
I'm not sure about 500. Certainly around 700 to 800. Definitely.
It's insane. It's insane. So yes, and that's why we do it. That's why we go to the projectors when we get to the larger screens. So yes, what do you do with a used TV? Isn't it getting difficult to sell a used TV since there are so many changes every year? Well, it depends on how long you had that TV. I have never tried to sell a used TV. I have always done one of two things: given it to somebody, or put it on the side of the road and wait till it goes away. I mean, that's pretty much what I do. Because the last time I had a used TV that I didn't have anything to do with, and I didn't give it to somebody, it was a CRT, and I'm like, this thing has gotta go. We gotta get this thing out of my house.
Well, I have sold previous flat panels, and I mean, I think maybe by listening to this podcast, you are far better informed than the vast majority of the public. Most people have no clue about all the latest features, and they don't care. There are two things people care about: size and price.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
If you have a large television to sell at a low price, someone will buy that from you.
Absolutely will.
It doesn't have to be great. It has to be functional. Most people want a functional TV. But yeah, it's size and price. So, I mean, maybe you won't be able to sell the TV for all the money you really think it's worth. You might have to drop your price to get somebody to buy it, but somebody will buy it.
Yeah. When Carl first got his JVC projector, he was using a $200 manual roll-down screen from Daylight. He used that for months. And he got a Stewart masking Electra screen, whatever it is. And he and his wife were shocked at the difference. She joked about needing sunglasses when they watched their first black and white movie on it. And when they had people over to watch Blade Runner on Ultra HD Blu-ray, everybody's jaws dropped, and they got lots of comments about how bright and rich the image looked. At the college campus where Carl works, one of the dedicated screening rooms uses the same GVC projector, but they're using an electric screen from Elite Screens, and Carl can see visible swirls on that screen. And it never looks anywhere near as good as his image at home. Carl is insisting that the screen be replaced by the end of the semester. You got that kind of power? All right, Carl, you go, man. If somebody can has the combination of high quality projector and high quality screen in a really black room, do we still hold the opinion that a flat panel will provide a more dynamic image with better HDR and contrast? With his own setup in mind as an example, he can't imagine he'd actually want anything brighter. Not to mention, even with the JVC projector and Stewart's screen costing several $1,000s each, there's still no way to match the 125-inch size for anything close to an affordable price. In short, why don't we see more enthusiastic about getting people to use projectors instead of flat panels? I don't know that I would say that we're not enthusiastic. I feel like that's a mischaracterization. I think this stems back to the time when somebody said, somebody asked if we prefer a flat panel or something like that, and I said that you'll never get the same dynamic range that you can get on on a flat panel that you can. You can get the same dynamic range on a projector that you can on the flat panel. I would really love to know all of Carl's setup options that he's got in his personal home theater, because I'm wondering, I would like to know that we're all talking about the same thing here, that he's not got it like in full lamp mode and it's super bright, and maybe the blacks aren't as black. I don't know. The contrast I'm talking about is going from black to white, full black to full white. When you go from full black to peak white, you can get a higher contrast on a flat panel, guaranteed, than you can on a projector. The reason being is that there's always light coming out of the projector. There's always light, which means your blacks can never be zero light. There's always some. And that black may look very black in comparison to how bright the whites are, but the reality is the dynamic change between the two is not from 0 to whatever the white is. Right, that you can get on a flat panel, that you can get on a screen that has a lot of zones of local dimming, or an OLED, where the blacks are truly just off. Right, that is essentially infinity contrast. It goes from 0 to nothing to something, and that's infinity contrast, no matter what the something is, and the something's only one. So that's where my statement comes from. That being said, there is no disagreement here between you and I about how good projectors can look. There is no disagreement between you and I that once you get to a certain size, you have to go to a projector. That is absolutely 100% true. I mean, you don't literally have to, but if you're not like so rich, they're never listening to this podcast, then you do have to, so that you can still afford food and stuff.
Yeah, Sony does have a 100-inch Z9D LCD, but it's $60,000. So, you can get a 100-inch projector that looks really, really good for a heck of a lot less than that. Yeah. But yeah, just factually, just objectively, the contrast on flat panels is higher than any home projector that you could buy. Again, you can get the absolute black of an OLED that no projector can completely produce, and then the peak white output of 1,000, or there are some LCDs you can buy now that are up to 1,500 or even close to 2,000 nits. That just isn't happening unless you shrink the image of your projection down, probably smaller than the flat panel would have to be in order to get you to that sort of level of peak white, and then your black level will rise too. Right. As you've shrunk all the light down into that smaller area. So just on a purely factual basis, the contrast on the flat panels will be higher. Now, does that mean they look better? Because there's the whole impact of the much larger image, which is one of the reasons why in standard dynamic range, we want our flat panels to at least be reaching 100 nits. That's the standard. And most people adjust their televisions to actually be brighter than 100 nits for full peak white. Whereas on a large projected image, you want about 50 nits. That's the standard in a commercial cinema, and that's what most of us want at home, because once you blow the image up that large, 100 nits looks really bright. Yeah. Your eye isn't just responding to little pinpoints of light, it's responding to how many photons are coming into my eye. So an average light level spread over a much larger surface area is a greater number of photons hitting your eye. That does have an impact on what we see. I wanted to address the part, though, where he says he can't imagine actually wanting anything brighter, and that to me speaks to the average picture level, the overall picture level being perhaps it's actually brighter than where the standards, the SMPTE standards, would have you set it. Now, you're under no obligation to follow that. If you like the bright, punchy image, you go for it.
Yeah,
But
it's your theater. You do what you want. But that's why I said at the beginning, I like to know his settings, because it sounds to me like his projector's too bright.
It could be, yeah. For the HDR side of things, that's a complete misconception. A lot of times we're hearing about these 1,000-nit things. That's for a teeny tiny little and momentary highlight, a little speck, a little glint off of some chrome, the reflection off of a wave in the water, sunlight reflecting off the peaks of the waves in the water, is these little glints of light that get that bright. The overall picture level is no brighter than it's ever been. The average picture level is exactly the same it's always been. We still have 0 to 100 nits as the standard for televisions, and 0 to 50 nits as the standard for projectors. And then you just have these little highlights, momentary, that go much brighter than that. So yeah, when it comes to watching HDR on a projector versus on a flat panel, it's those little glints of light that are objectively that much brighter on a flat panel versus the darker parts of the screen. There's no escaping that. And those little glints aren't necessarily going to be gigantic even on your gigantic screen. They're going to be larger than a flat panel, but they're still going to be small little highlights.
Yeah, in comparison to everything else.
So for the people who've had a lot of experience watching both an OLED and a JVC projector on a 135-inch screen, they're like, yeah, the HDR little teeny highlights that give you that sense of realism, not this image is so much brighter on the flat panel. It isn't. They should actually be close to equal in overall sense, but the little momentary glints are brighter on the flat panel, and it gives that little extra spark to it. So that's all. But yeah, I recommend people get projectors all the time. I think he's like, why aren't we trying to persuade people to go projector more often? I'm like, I'm not going to try and get someone to black out their room if they're not going to black out their room. I'm not going to tell someone.
That's what this podcast is about. I mean, unfortunately, and I think we've kept it really, really. We've been very good about making sure that this podcast is about answering your question. Your question could be something that we don't think you should do, but it's your question, so we are going to give you the answer to it. And we've said that. How many times have we said that on this podcast where we said, like, listen, this is the answer to your question. Now, this is what we think you should do, but this is the answer to your question, because that's what we're trying to do here. If someone comes to me and says, what size flat panel do I need for a 15-foot seeing distance? The answer is you need a projector.
Yes.
And a screen.
But if the rest of your environment means a projector is not going to look good, then
I'm going to say get the biggest one you can get, because it's going to be too small anyways.
Yeah, because Carl put it right there in the question. Like, if you have a high-quality projector, a high-quality screen, and a really black room, there's a ton of people who don't have that really black room.
Yeah.
That's a really big stumbling block in a lot of instances. So let's say I had the really black room. If I'm 6.5 feet away, I'm still going to choose a flat panel because it doesn't make sense to use a projector. If I'm 10 feet away, I'm going to go projector if I have the really black room. And 10 feet away, a lot of people are using flat panels when they're only 10 feet away. But I'm going to go projector because I want the 45-degree field of view, and that's going to be really expensive to get in a flat panel. So I'm switching over, but it's the really black room part. That's the caveat.
That's the caveat, yeah. That's the stumbling block. Dan has an Onkyo AV receiver, but sometimes he doesn't want to use his full surround sound system when he just wants to look at something on TV. So he tried using his Onkyo's HDMI standby pass-through feature, but he discovered that it either always passes through one specific HDMI input, or it can be set to pass through whatever HDMI input was last used. Is there any way to switch sources without powering on the Onkyo? Automatically switching to whichever source gets powered on would be great. And if his Onkyo can't do it, is there any receivers from other brands that can? I don't think that's how HDMI pass-through works. I don't think you have that option on any receiver that I can think of.
I've never seen it as an option.
It's
exactly what he described.
What you describe is exactly. It's like you're not doing anything wrong, because if you ask me how HDMI pass-through works, I'd be like, it's either the last thing you looked at, or it's you can choose one source. And honestly, that seems like 90% of the people would be happy with those two options, because most of the time it's one source. They want to be able to pass through the cable box,
right?
Because they want to check the news real quick, or something like that. But no, there is no way. There is no receiver I can even think of that has anything other than those two options.
Yeah, I'm not going to declare 100% that there's no such thing. I'm just going to say I've never seen it. So this isn't like an Onkyo thing or a Denon thing. Is this what you described with the one input always, or whatever was used last. That's what I've seen on every receiver that has HDMI standby pass through. So the only thing I can think of to do what he wants to do, because I mean, the one option is you turn on the Onkyo to switch to the source that you want and you turn it back off and you use that HDMI last as the setting, but that's a whole hassle he doesn't want to go through. So the only thing I could think to do was to get an external HDMI switch that has automatic switching. That you feed into, let's just say, HDMI input 1 on the Onkyo, and then you set the standby pass-through to always go to HDMI input 1.
Right.
And that way, if the Onkyo is off, it's still passing through its HDMI number 1 input. That's connected to
all your sources
external
to the switch, and the switch goes into the...
And the switch automatically switches, because there's plenty of HDMI switches that automatically switch.
Right. There's lots of options out there for that.
Yeah.
Right.
My recommendation is from Sewell. It's their Switch Deck. The reason I recommend that one, that's a 5-in, 1-out. It does have automatic input switching. And I like it because it's the full 18 gigabits with HDCP 2.2, so any source you connect to it will get passed through the full audio, the full video. You're not going to have to worry about that until we start getting into 8K and 48 gigabit stuff. But for right now, it's completely feature set and a very reasonable price for that. What is it, $65, I think?
Sounds about right. I mean, you should be able to find that switch for cheaper, and you should be able to find lots of them that are more expensive. So, just do your research. The only thing that the only problems I've ever, and I've said this in this podcast lots of times, but it bears repeating. The only problem with automatic switching is that some devices are always on, and they will always show as being on. So your switches usually have some sort of priority. So you would put those devices, which is a lot of times Xbox or a cable box or something like that. You put those way down low on the priority, so that when you turn on your DVD or your Ultra HD Blu-ray player, that usually when you turn it off, it is off. It doesn't show up at all. So you want that to override. So you're going to put that in like slot 1, and then slot 2 would be, something else. And you're going to put your cable box or whichever one. Then you'll have to test this. You'll have to test to see how this works. If you have any sources that you never use this for too, you can that you never would pass through, you can then put those towards, just directly into the receiver.
Directly into the receiver, yeah.
That would just cut out some of those problems. All right. Josh has heard us mention issues with the audio output from Xboxes, but what are the specifics? I've complained about it so much, I cannot believe he's asking me the specifics, but I am so happy he did. What exactly does the Xbox do wrong when it comes to audio? And is it the Xbox One, the Xbox 360, or all Xboxes that we're talking about? Okay, we're talking about the Xbox One and up. So I don't know what changes is with the S and the Xbox.
Hasn't been fixed.
Okay.
It's the same thing.
This is the problem that I ran into first. Okay. The first problem is that they didn't have any way to bitstream out. When you bitstreamed, originally, you bitstreamed out either Dolby Digital, which is lossy, or DTS, which is also lossy. So your only way of getting full audio, high definition audio out of your Xbox was to set it to either 5.1 or 7.1 channel.
Okay. Yeah, that was uncompressed PCM.
That's right, which was great because that gave you the full thing. But if you set it to 7.1, because God help you, you actually have a 7.1 system, the Xbox takes what should be the side surround data and puts it in the surround backs. Your side surrounds do nothing, and everything comes out of the surround back speakers, which is uber dumb. So what you have to do is then set even though you've got a 7.1 system, you're going to set it to 5.1. So that your surround backs can then be matrixed from there. But if you go to a movie that has 7.1 audio,
actual 7.1, or a game that had actual 7.1 audio,
then you have to go back and change your audio to 7.1 so that you can get all 7.1 channels.
Yep.
You know who really likes that? My wife, who's like, "Are you kidding me? Will you stop messing with the things?" I'm like, "I gotta get all the audio." Okay. They have since changed it.
Yes.
And now we have a bitstream Dolby surround.
Yeah.
That you can get out.
Dolby Atmos, actually.
Atmos that you can get out. And that goes, if you have an Atmos soundtrack, it works great. If you do not have an Atmos soundtrack, I'll be honest, at this point, I don't even know what it does anymore. I think it sends out like a 7.1 and then nothing, I guess.
With a flag. It has a flag attached to it. Yeah.
So it's just listen. Bitstream. out. That's all I want. You know
Mhm.
what? Make the 7.1 work. If you could make the 7.1 work, I'd
Mm.
be happy. All right. I'd
Mm.
be thrilled if you could make the 7.1. How is that still a problem that happens today? Just whatever is on the disc, whatever is in the Netflix, whatever is on Hulu, send that.
Mm.
Okay. Because if it's stereo, guess what? My receiver can do all kinds of stuff to stereo. You know what it can't do anything with? 7.1 channels with only the left and right channels working. Everything else has got 0 coming out of it. You can't matrix that. You can't fix it. It's
Yes. So I want to start with what they're getting right now that they've done the update, which is if you're playing a physical disc, a physical DVD, Blu-ray, or Ultra HD Blu-ray.
yes, they have fixed that.
That can be done exactly the way we want it now. That is under the what is it? Disc and something, whatever in the
Disc
settings.
playback, the disc and
something and disc. I forget the exact name, but anyways, one of the settings lower down. But that's for actual physical disc, and they have a checkbox for let my receiver decode audio. And
why doesn't that checkbox work for everything? That's what I don't understand. Why does it only work for discs?
Only for physical discs, but that takes care of physical discs, so that part we're okay with now. Everything else, so that's streaming services, games, things that are passing through the HDMI input, which we might talk about later if we get to that question, those, essentially what's going on with all of those things, everything that isn't a physical movie disc, the Xbox is decoding the audio itself. That's what it's doing. Inside the Xbox, everything gets turned to PCM. And then in the output settings, in your audio output settings, what you are selecting is a container. You're selecting what container does the audio get put into, and everything gets sent out as that container. So the problem is, exactly as Tom described, if you set it to 7.1 uncompressed PCM because you have a 7.1 audio system, everything got decoded into PCM and then put into a 7.1 container, but that doesn't mean all 7.1 speakers are actually being utilized, because if it was stereo audio, only the left and right actually contain audio, so you can't apply your own upmixer, and whatever that weird mapping problem, which why the heck hasn't that been fixed yet, but if it's originated as 5.1, but you put it into the 7.1 container, it incorrectly maps the surround channels into the surround backs, which is hugely annoying. So the Atmos container, which is one of the options now, I can say send it out as a bitstream and send it out as Atmos. Unfortunately, it's still doing it. It's still decoding it into PCM. It still might be 2-channel only, and it's being thrown out there in a. It actually activates your AV receiver's Dolby Surround listening mode. It doesn't show up as Atmos. It shows up as Dolby Surround, but there's like no way to not select Dolby Surround. So that's the flag that's attached to it that says, "Hey, receiver, go into Dolby Surround mode." But I might only be sending you 2 channels. So all your other speakers go silent while your front left and right play, even though it says Dolby Surround on the front of your receiver, and you still can't. How can you upmix from that? It's already engaged the upmixer. Nothing can be done. So yeah, it's that's the frustration. Those are the specifics.
I really want to watch that new Cloverfield thing that they announced at the Super Bowl.
It's on Netflix.
I thought that was so neat that I went into Netflix afterwards. I was like, dude, I just saw the commercial for this thing, and it's
the
here.
Commercial that's coming very soon.
Dude, very soon. It was like literally right after the game. I'm very excited, but it's as much flack as I give J.J. Abrams about stuff that he has done in his movies that he's made, he may not be the most technically proficient director. He might not be the best storyteller, but I mean, I loved the first season of Alias. Loved it. Thought it was great. Went completely off the rails really quick, but it was really great series. I thought that Lost seemed like it was pretty good until I was like, I can no longer follow this garbage. The first Star Trek movie he did was fine. I mean, it was stupid that Kirk ends up on a planet 5 feet from Spock, that he got randomly dropped off on. I'm like, what is the Force in play here? Force Awakens.
He had to meet Yoda. Spock was Yoda in that movie.
I know. I thought Force Awakens was fine. I enjoyed the movie. I've watched it multiple times. I've never thought to myself, this is a terrible movie. I've thought it was fine. Cloverfield was like it was literally like going to the doctor. You're like, even if it's great experience, you're still getting a shot. And that's the way I felt about Cloverfield, was that As
Well, he didn't direct that. He just produced that.
as that type of movie, it was really well done.
Hmm.
I just hate that type of movie. I'm like, just will you stop not showing the monster? Show the monster, please. Thank you. 10 Cloverfield Lane, I thought was excellent as well, even though the ending was kind of lame. But I'm very excited about this. I think this could be very interesting. I'm very interested to see how this thing turns out. I still haven't watched Bright yet.
Neither have I.
And it's not. Yeah, I don't think I put it on my. Anyways, we'll see. Let's get into this. Rob in Saskatoon, which I guess is someplace in Canada.
That's Saskatchewan. It's in Saskatchewan, Canada.
All right. Here's what Rob has. Rob has, this is not you, a different Rob, a SR6011 receiver upstairs, a Denon X6200W receiver downstairs. Most of his content coming from an NVIDIA Shield TV, a pair of Beats Solo 3 Bluetooth headphones, and a baby on the way.
Congratulations.
One of these things is not like the other. Rob is thinking he'd like to be able to use headphones either upstairs, downstairs, or both, but he has a few concerns. His Beats Solo 3 headphones are wireless and use Bluetooth, but they do not have aptX. It's possible to plug them in using a 3.5 millimeter cable. What should he do? Can he just pair his existing non-aptX headphones with one of the receivers? Should he get a Bluetooth transmitter and use that with his headphones without aptX? Should he get both an aptX receiver, transmitter, and a receiver? Or should he just get an entirely new set of wireless headphones, such as the Sennheisers, that the RS-165s that Wirecutter recommends? I gotta say, I just read all that and I'm a little confused. What does he want to do?
So he wants headphones for when
Right,
he doesn't want to disturb people. He's got a pair of headphones that are Bluetooth, but not aptX. So he's like, well, what should he do here? What should be the solution? So
the aptX, for those of you that aren't familiar, is the basically CD quality streaming over
via a Bluetooth connection.
Via Bluetooth connection. Yeah. That's what it is. So his headphones do not have them, which means even if he has a receiver or something that can send out aptX, he can't get it. So he's going to get something lossy. If he gets an aptX receiver and a transmitter, that means that the transmitter can be used to send it. The receiver he can plug his headphones into that receiver and then stick that thing in his pocket. And then he's got his wireless headphones are connected by a wire to a wireless receiver that can get aptX.
But it has aptX at that point.
Right. What are you listening to? And how important is your sound to being aptX? I mean, are you listening to I guess he's streaming a lot of stuff on his NVIDIA Shield. So, but if you're streaming like Pandora or what's the other one? Spotify or something like that, or YouTube, or anything else, are you really needing to put out CD quality sound? Chances are you're not.
Especially for, I'm assuming the point of this is when the baby's asleep, which means you're probably not going to be cranking it up anyway because you need to hear if you're needed still.
I mean, I don't know. I would question whether or not aptX is that important. Yeah, I know that in Bluetooth, my Bluetooth experience, I've never thought, well, the Bluetooth wasn't lacking so much. This would be a really good listening experience. Most of the time, my problem is I accidentally stepped in front of between the headphone and the receiver, and now I can no longer hear anything. That's why, or someone turned on the microwave and now it doesn't work anymore. That's usually my experience with Bluetooth. But my thought would be just to stick with what you have. I'll be honest with you. I would just go with what you have. But if you really want to do something, what makes the most sense to me is either plug in when you want to have good sound,
right,
and not worry about it the rest of the time, or get a new pair of headphones that actually has the stuff you want. That would be my
I mean, my number one answer to you is get a cable that's long enough that you can just physically plug it into your AV receiver, because it's pretty easy to buy an extension cable. And most receivers use the larger 1/4-inch jack rather than the smaller 3.5 millimeter, but they make adapters for those. In fact, your headphones probably came with one of those adapters, because most headphones that come with a wire do. So I would either just plug in, because that's easy enough, or so he was asking, could you just connect Bluetooth headphones directly to AV receivers? Because lots of AV receivers say they have Bluetooth these days, but those the Bluetooth that's on a receiver is for receiving content from a Bluetooth source. It's not for sending Bluetooth to something else.
Does NVIDIA Shield have a Bluetooth transmitter in it? I don't know.
Golly, not that I'm aware of. I know the Rokus, you can actually plug headphones into the Roku remote. And that makes them semi-wireless anyway. You're plugged into the remote, and that's your little wireless audio thing.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
But yeah, I mean, so last week we talked about, or might have been the week before, I can't remember now, but the company AVRant, which makes lower cost Bluetooth adapter type stuff. So I would probably recommend you just get one of their Bluetooth transmitters. I wouldn't worry about the aptX side of things. You've already got the Bluetooth headphones. I'm not going to be super worried about that. If you really want to, though, they do sell a $60 combo of a transmitter and receiver that have aptX. So for $60, if that's going to assuage your fears about aptX, that's really not too bad.
Yeah.
So I would either do that.
You could buy a really long cable. Like you could go and do your yard with this cable. You know what I mean?
So yeah, I would either get a Bluetooth transmitter and not worry about aptX. I'd get the combo that gives you aptX, and you'd have to plug your headphones into the little Bluetooth receiver, or I'd just plug it in directly with a cable. Those would be my solutions here. I don't see any reason to buy whole new headphones.
Yeah. Especially since she's going to have to buy the transmitter anyways at that point. So he's also interested in using Dolby headphone or DTS headphone X, but it's difficult to figure out which AV receivers offer those up mixers. Do either his SR6011 or X6200W have Dolby headphone or DTS headphone X? I'm going to guess no. Go.
You are correct. Neither of those receivers have Dolby headphone or DTS headphone X, but they do have a virtual surround up mixer that works for headphones. So it's not Dolby or DTS branded, but it's their own version of it. It's called the virtual surround listening mode, and that works for either stereo left-right speakers or for headphones. It says it right there in the manual. So it might not be the branding you were looking for, but it's very effectively the same thing. It gives you that sense that the sound is not completely between your own ears. And from what I've tried of it, I'm like, it's just as good. So you could just use that.
All right.
Yeah.
So how can he get the whole package he's looking for? Wireless headphones, high quality, and headphone upmixing like Dolby DTS, Dolby headphone or DTS headphone X. For this, you are going to have to buy new headphones, I think.
So yeah, if you really wanted that, I would probably send you to Astro Gaming.
Okay.
They have their A50s, which is not cheap. What is it, $300, $350, something like that? I'll have to look up the price here. But yeah, that comes with $300. That comes with a base station. You would plug that, so you would plug an output, probably the actual headphone jack of your receiver, because I'm assuming when you're listening to the headphones, you want all the other speakers to turn off, but you still want to be able to listen to any source that's plugged into your AV receiver.
Sure.
Because you could connect it via the Zone 2 output, but then whatever source you're listening to from the Zone 2 pre-outs would have to be set to 2-channel stereo, so that's a whole other step you have to take in the sources output menu. That's a hassle, whereas if you just plug it into the headphone jack, that automatically switches off, but your AV receiver will still down convert anything that's being sent from the source device. So you'd probably do that, but that goes to a wireless base station, which then goes to the A50 headphones, which are very good wireless headphones, and they have Dolby Headphones 7.1. So that's kind of all the things you were asking for, but it's $300 to do that. There are other ones that do it too, but I know the Astros work well. There was the other solution. This is where I could talk about the Xbox. He didn't mention having an Xbox One, but an interesting thing you can do with the Xbox One is plug your headphones into the controller.
Yeah.
And it will send the audio wirelessly with Atmos upmixing, Atmos headphone upmixing, if you pay for the Dolby Atmos app. Otherwise, you can use Windows Sonic for free. That's already built in to the Xbox One. So that will work over headphones, and it will work wirelessly with the weird little caveat that you're actually plugging your headphones into the Xbox One controller to do it.
Doesn't exactly fit in your pocket either.
Not quite. But one other little side thing to that is I'm thinking he might want to watch TV at some point from his cable box. And he would be going, hey, the Xbox One has an HDMI input. which it does, but that HDMI input is limited to HDMI 1.4. So, like he was saying, most things are coming from his NVIDIA Shield.
Right.
And he still wants to be able to get HDR from his NVIDIA Shield. That's not going to work if you plug it into the Xbox One, unfortunately, because that's an HDMI 1.4 port. So you could just do all your streaming through the Xbox One, because it has the vast majority of the streaming apps you might want to use. I don't even know
if he has an Xbox One, but...
Well, I'm just saying that's another potential way you could do this. And since that actually has Dolby Atmos headphone upmixing, one of the few devices that does. But honestly, my answer is just plug into your AV receiver or get a Bluetooth transmitter and use the virtual upmixing mode that Denon and Marantz already provide.
I agree.
Yeah.
Alex has something of a Franken theater. Now, there's going to be a picture on the YouTube channel once we get the finished video. So this looks like a fisheye lens or a wide-angle lens or whatever. Everything's all
or a panoramic shot.
His room is 19 by 14 by 7 feet 7 inches. It is wider than it is long. He bought an Epson 2150 projector on Black Friday, a 110-inch motorized screen. He loves a giant screen experience. So now it's time to upgrade the sound. He currently has a 10-year-old Onkyo TX SR502, a Bic America RTR 15-inch three-way towers. Wow. For left and right, they're upside down. Otherwise, the screen blocks the mid-range and tweeters.
So that tweeter is right next to the floor right now.
Yeah,
it's very close to the floor right now. Yeah, that's what's going on there.
A Pioneer center channel and some old Logitech Z5500s for surrounds. Oh, that's hilarious. Look at those speakers are upside down. You can see so whenever the ports chuff, they blow the screen around.
Yeah, they could.
That's a theory. Okay. Interesting. Wow. Look at those red drivers. Okay. Lots of stuff in here to take in. He's got some guitars on the wall. He's got his projector hung upside down on a mount. Is that what that's happening? Upside down from a mount on a shelf.
Yeah. So he's like installed a shelf, but then used a projector ceiling mount to attach to the bottom of said shelf. Yeah. That's what it looks like anyway.
I have a feeling I know why that is, but we're not going to judge that. Okay, so he's aiming for a good 7.1 system for $2,000 spread out over the next year or so. Since it's a long-term plan, he wants to purchase things in stages. He'd like our help with the sequence as well as our input on initial ideas. First step, upgrade his Denon to an AVR. Upgrade his receiver to a Denon AVR X3300. I think it's a W receiver. He doesn't like the way his Pioneer Center sounds, and he thinks maybe room correction might improve it. Okay, first of all, I have to scroll. I need to see that. I scrolled too far. I scrolled too far again. Hold on. This is very hard to scroll this thing. Hold on.
What is it you need to see?
Okay, first of all, I do not agree with 7.1.
Right. Yes,
you need 5.2. But 5.1 is what you're not going to put two speakers behind your head because your head is on the wall.
Yeah, so not with where that seat is. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, you could go 5.1.2. You could actually do the minimum Atmos setup because
I agree with that too.
Yeah.
If you're thinking of you want lots of speakers, the first thing you're going to think about is that you do not want 7 channels. You want 5 channels and then maybe some overhead speakers. I do not also agree with the idea of upgrading your receiver first, unfortunately.
It's a little tricky because, I mean, that receiver is older at this point.
He's
going to need a new one at some point.
No, I agree 100%. But I think the first purchase is the speakers, and then you get the receiver. And the reason I think that is this. CS just happened. We're going to see new receivers hitting the market, which means we're going to see new receivers inside accessories for less not too long afterwards.
Yeah, but the X3300 is cheap right now at $500 and might not be around that much longer. Stock is starting to run out on that year.
I'm not going to say that I totally disagree with that, but if we're talking about doing this over the course of a year or so, there's a lot of stuff that can happen in the receiver prices in a year or so. I mean, we were having the same conversation about the Denon 4000 not that long ago, and it was that people were jumping on it and stuff like that, and it was great. But
I mean, what else is going to come down to $500? Probably the 3400.
Yeah.
And what are you getting in the 3400 over the 3300? eARC? I think that's that's literally the only feature.
You might get the 43. You might get the 43 that low. Could be
43 that low. I think stock's all going to be gone before it gets down to $500. 44 is not going to get down to $500. Yeah, I mean, normally I'd be in complete agreement. The only reason I'm saying I might agree with this idea is because stock of that model year it's starting to run out, and I don't know if you're going to be able to get that price. I mean, you will eventually on the 3400, but
Right.
you might end up having to wait longer than you want to before it gets down there. So I'm not against getting the 3300 right now while you can at $500 because that's a killer price.
I'm certainly not going to say you're a bad person or that you've made a mistake. If it were me, I would be focusing on getting the speakers. Now, room correction is not going to help the way your center speaker sounds, more than likely.
I mean, it might a little, but I don't think to the degree you're hoping for.
Yeah, it's not going to be like a night a day thing. Now, first of all, I cannot see your center channel, which makes
you can see it in the version where it's actually the screen retracted and looking at the TV, and it is just on a tabletop and a little bit recessed and not decoupled from that tabletop.
Which one is it? I don't see. Oh, that's a black box. I thought that was. Okay, I see it now. Yeah, pull it forward a little bit so that its baffle is at least flush, not the grill. The baffle is flush with the front of your thing.
Yeah.
And consider aiming it maybe, and then also it looks like it's probably going right towards your face, but it could be maybe angled up a little bit, and then consider putting some room treatments behind your head,
and something squishy underneath that, because that one is light enough it can actually, like, if not outright rattle, it'll cause some resonance in the surface on which it's sitting. So mouse pads.
I got some mouse pads for you, dude. They're only $200 a pop. You'll need two. For this speaker, you probably only need one. Tell you what.
Well, actually, that Pioneer should have come with little rubber stands. It comes with those.
Oh, hopefully, he's got those.
Yeah.
So I don't think that the receiver is going to fix your center channel problems, but we can address that now.
And I agree, some insulation behind your head because you're right up against that back wall.
Yeah. So in this case, you've got those big pillows on that thing. Just like sit on the couch and put the pillows behind your head for a second and see if that makes it any better, because it very well might.
Yeah.
His second step he's got here is get a sub, either a HSU VTF2 Mark V or build a mini Marty enclosure, which is for an 18-inch. How's that a mini Marty if it's that 18-inch Dayton Ultramax driver and use an iNuke 3000 DSP to amp it? He loves the idea of DIY, but how much better would it be for the effort compared to the HSU sub? I have no idea. I've never heard of this. It's the first time those words have ever come out of my mouth.
It's larger than 2 feet by 2 feet, and it's 40 inches high.
Holy crap!
Where the heck are you going to put that thing, dude?
It's a full mini. Build a box, son.
Build a cardboard model, because you might be thinking 2 feet by 2 feet. That's not so bad.
It's big.
Dude, this thing is ridiculous.
Rob just duded you. It's like the first time there's ever been a dude said on this podcast that didn't come out of my mouth. Dude, well, Liz probably said it, but not Rob. Rob never says, dude, you have been duded.
And you don't need it for this room size. And I mean, I'll agree, the value you can get out of DIY, that's okay, but that's not the model to go for. There's plenty of other models you could opt for.
This room isn't even that big, really.
It's not that huge.
It's not that big. So, I mean, if you want to DIY, come up with some other options that you can.
I mean, an SVS PB1000 at $500, which winds up being less expensive than the HSU, because the HSU, they charge shipping on top of the price that's shown on the website. They're shipping on top of that. So $500 all in for a PB1000. I know that seems so much smaller. You're like, it's a 10-inch driver. For 2,500 cubic feet, which is the max you're dealing with in here, that's okay. Now, if you want to go with the HSU for whatever reason, I got zero beef with that, because the VTF2 is a really nice subwoofer. I also have zero beef with you going DIY, just not that particular design. That's completely mismatched with your room. So maybe a smaller DIY design, which could end up being quite a bit less expensive. That'd be all right.
His third step is he's considering replacing the mains and center with something we recommend, or DIY HTM 10s.
Which are big old horn-loaded.
Oh,
I mean, they're big, they're horn-loaded.
Oh, dude, stop it with the big speakers. Given the short height requirements to fit below the screen and the smallest room dimensions, what do we recommend? Well, I wish those new RVH speakers were out. There are a lot. You know what I'm going to recommend? Here we go. I'm going to recommend Focal Birds.
You could do that.
Because this is your problem. Your problem is that you've got I mean, the problem. This is the issue that I'm seeing here. You have your heart set on these massive speakers, the big old sub, the big old speakers.
That's a big old sub.
You know, that there's no reason for any of this in your current room.
No.
You sit like, how far away can he
could be 12 feet away because, I mean, that's a 14-foot.
But he could put the speakers like right there on that thing, you know what I mean? That he's got up there, and then or mount them to the walls or whatever, and get them the right height so the tweeter's not on the floor, and he's getting the room bounce on that thing. It's got to be insane. It's a floor bouncing off the floor, going up the ceiling,
with the birds, you could actually mount your front left speaker to the side wall and use its pivot mount, so it's aiming at you.
Exactly,
that'd be okay.
And then you could have matched speakers all the way around this bad boy. You know, you could have them on your ceiling, you could have them on your sides, you could have them everywhere. And they could be used for center. It'd be perfectly tamper matched. You could use them all. Now they're what, like $250 a pair, right? Is that what they are?
So the birds are $150 each, so it's $300.
So $300 a pair. Okay, so that's not that bad.
For less. Yeah.
That's not that bad. That's not in my I don't know.
And you could go little birds for the surrounds and the overhead. Those are $100 each.
Right.
So yeah, it'll fit your budget.
I think that and I know that we've talked about all this stuff. I think Rob is going to say go receiver first and then something else. I can get behind that. I'm fine with that. If you want to go with the Denon AVR X3300, whatever this, I'm okay with that. But I think speakers are second, even before subs.
Yep.
I think speakers are second.
I agree.
And then the subs come dead last. Okay. And they actually come dead last after room treatments, which is not on this list.
Wouldn't you get front three, then sub, then surrounds, and then overheads?
I think that he should just get them all at the same time.
Just get all the speakers at the same time. Well, maybe he can't though. You know, budget.
Well, and that's just what
over time.
I understand that, and this is why I'm saying that is because if we're going to send them the accessories for less, the last thing I want them to do is start buying Focal bird speakers,
and then they're gone.
And then they're gone.
Yeah.
So don't buy them until you got enough for all of them, and then get all the speakers that you want.
Yeah, I can 100% get behind that plan. If I were just recommending sight unseen and you just showed me your room and you're like, what should I get? I would be wholly on board. I am taking into account the things he suggested, these particular DIY speakers, this particular DIY sub, and I'm thinking he wants crazy loud output. And if that's the case, I'm going to suggest you might want to look at HSU's speakers. They're horn-loaded speakers, which are not crazy expensive. They are very efficient, but they're far more reasonable for your room size than the DIY stuff that you've suggested, and actually not any more expensive. You could actually get all the speakers and the sub all from HSU if you want to, because
absolutely,
again, I've got zero problem with that VTF2. So HSU's horn-loaded speakers, I think, would work really nicely in here as well. And yeah, as for the order, like I said, if you really do need to buy in stages, I would go the AV receiver in this case just because I don't want you to miss out on the price. And that's really the only reason. Yeah. And then I would get your front three speakers, then I would get your sub, then I would get your surrounds, then I would get your overheads.
And I don't want to hear any more suggestions about floor standing speakers in this room. Okay. I know that.
No, for price and that, it doesn't make sense.
For price, for your budget and everything else, we could get you all in on this thing way under $2,000, I believe. You know,
it's not way under, but it's
I mean,
there.
Considering, I mean, and the speakers that you were looking at, I just looked at them. The DIY HTM 10s are massive. I mean, they're just
it's not even really going to make sense. They're going to end up sitting on the floor anyway, and
I think getting something where you can wall mount it, or you can put it on a little stand or on top of your currently existing furniture. I think that's sort of the way to go.
Yeah. Or you can even lay them sideways, like those horn-loaded ones. You can lay them sideways because the dispersion's even in every direction.
Right. You can also look at the NHTs, the Super Zeros.
Yeah, the NHTs. Yeah,
depending on how far back you're sitting.
They don't play super loud, so I'm really thinking he wants loud in here. So.
It could be. In which case, he can also look at Klipsch and all the other horn-loaded options that are out there.
I mean, Kef would be a really nice option too, but again, getting like Q100s, they're a little bit small in the output terms, and they're running out of stock on those too. And then if you get the new series, they're actually quite a bit more expensive. So
So we were only on 3. So fourth
Yep.
step, he thought, was replace the cheap computer surrounds with cheap bookshelves. Dayton makes them for $50 a pair, so we could get 2 pairs for $100 and he'd be good to go. But there are better options. We already kind of talked about this, but
I go matching because you can get matching within your budget. So if you're
yeah.
going birds, get little birds. If you're going HSU, get more HSUs.
And I know they are a little bit more expensive than what you're kind of thinking of here, but you might as well go I think you're going up to a big boy theater here. I know we're talking about getting some small speakers, and you're like, I had these big speakers, and now I'm getting little speakers. We're going for sound quality, and we're going for right speaker for your room.
Yep.
And that's where we are. We're giving you these things because trying to fit a floor standing speaker, which clearly is not working. I mean, I think we can all agree that having speakers inverted upside down in your is not an ideal placement. I think your option here is receiver or speakers first, and then receivers or speakers second, depending on which one you went with.
Yep.
Room treatments, then sub, and then if you haven't gotten the rest of your speakers, the rest of your speakers. And room treatments, again, you just go to GIK Acoustics, go see what they've got. You're going to need some, you're going to need something behind your head, 100% for sure. Yes. You're going to need something at your first reflection points on that left wall if you can do it. I can't scroll up fast enough.
And if you want to save some money, they sell kits, as does Acoustimac. Acoustimac also sells kits that you can assemble yourself. I mean, you could go completely DIY. That's fine.
Buy the installation. It's not that hard to get. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do here, and you could do a lot of that in this room. So I'm just looking at it. I'm seeing all this white space, and I mean, I don't know what that is. Is that like an electrical panel behind him? But basically, if you could just every couple of feet, with like a 1 panel width break, put panels all around this little area.
I mean, he already put up some foam panels on the front left wall there, so he's not averse to the idea of acoustic treatments, obviously. But foam isn't really doing much, especially when it's that thin and it's foam. So
and it's not at a first reflection. I mean, it might be at a first reflection point if it was lower and your speaker was the right side up. So yeah. So yeah, we'll get this. We'll get this kind of sorted out. I hope that helps, and let us know what you decide to do. Niels. Scrolling. Niels recently upgraded from a Panasonic Plasma to an LG B7 OLED TV, like Rob. His receiver is a Denon X4300H. His 4K HDR sources are an LG Ultra HD Blu-ray player and an Apple TV 4K. The rest of his sources are standard dynamic range, including a region-free Oppo Blu-ray player. Niels discovered that it is necessary to activate the HDMI Ultra HD color setting for whichever HDMI input he is using for HDR content on his OLED TV. If that setting is not activated, HDR content is limited to SDR. On his LG OLED, HDMI input 2 is the ARC, or the audio return channel port, and he's using the TV's built-in streaming app. So that is the port he connected to his X4300H, and he activated HDMI Ultra HD color on that port. There are so many words.
Sense. I know.
There's so many words. It's never stopping. I'm still on the same. Okay, for most of his sources, everything is fine, but his Oppo Blu-ray player and his cable box have issues. The cable box loses all audio for some reason. The Oppo loses audio, and its colors appear all messed up. Niels found that if he turns HDMI Ultra HD color off, his cable box and Oppo both work fine, video and audio. So that's all sorted out. So apparently that is the setting causing the problem. And the LG TV even includes a warning that older sources might experience problems. All right. So apparently you've solved it. You're welcome. Still more words. Neil has tried several workarounds. I've solved it, but I want it fixed. Since the OLED has 4 HDMI inputs, he doesn't have to activate HDMI Ultra HD color on all of them, but he's trying to come up with an elegant solution that won't involve having to manually adjust settings every time he switches from an HDR source to an SDR source or vice versa. He thought of plugging 2 4K HDR sources directly into the TV. His Ultra HD Blu-ray player can send audio separately, so that's fine, but the Apple TV 4K only has 1 HDMI output, so he can't. So that doesn't fully solve his issue. He thought of plugging his SDR sources directly into TV, but then his region-free Oppo doesn't have a way of sending lossless audio to his receiver.
Yeah.
He thought of using, oh my God, there's so many words. He thought of using both the main and sub HDMI outputs on the X4300H, the main output feeding the HDMI Ultra HD color input on the OLED TV, while the sub output feeds a non-Ultra HD color input. But if both outputs are activated at the same time, the DINA defaults to only sending the lowest common denominator, which means he's down to SDR.
Down to SDR for everything, yeah.
So he has to manually switch which HDMI output is active, and there's no easy way to make a macro for his Harmony remote because the menu system in the DINA wraps, meaning you can't just count the number of up or down presses. If you start at the bottom of the menu and press down, it wraps back to the first position of the menu on blah, blah, blah. On Rob's, oh my God. On Rob's advice, he tried using the HDMI Zone 2 output, but in order to still hear surround sound audio, both the main zone and HDMI Zone 2 have to be set to the same source. And that means the audio gets set to the lowest common denominator, which is actually fine for any Dolby format. The OLED can even decode Atmos, but it doesn't work for the DTS formats. The OLED can't handle those at all.
Yeah.
So how does he make this all work? He wants his X4300H to handle all the audio. Then his 4K HDR sources need to feed an HDMI input that has HDMI Ultra HD color active. If you guys are not following this, we're all in the same boat. While his SDR sources feed an HDMI input with an HDMI Ultra HD color inactive. Could there be a simple... I said that. Could there be a simple and inexpensive solution using an HDMI splitter somewhere in the signal chain? It's got to be an HD Fury. Someplace HD Fury has a product that solves this very specific problem that is very specific. Now, could the real solution be just not use that Oppo anymore? Can that be the real solution?
Well, region free. Plus he uses it to play SACDs.
Yeah, so I have an old one like that too, dude, and I feel it's not in my system, but it's still in the closet. And anytime I want to whip out an SACD, I go and get it because it's region free and it's got all the. I know what you're saying. You're saying.
So it is HD Fury. I do have a solution for this. It's gonna cause more problems once you get more HDR sources if you go with this solution. But HD Fury does sell a product called the AVR Key. It's $150, but what it does is, so you know how on an Ultra HD Blu-ray player, the vast majority of them have two HDMI outputs.
Yeah.
One of them labeled audio only.
Yeah.
That's what the AVR Key is. It's an HDMI input to two outputs, and one of those two outputs is audio only. It separates the audio and video, sending anything including 4K HDR video out the video output, and then separately sending the audio to it. So it was designed for, I have an older AV receiver that's HDMI 1.4 or HDCP 1.4, but that could work in his case. So like he has right now two 4K HDR sources, an Ultra HD Blu-ray player and an Apple TV 4K.
Right.
And his Ultra HD Blu-ray player can already separate video and audio, so he could plug that into, say, HDMI input number 3, and he could activate the HDMI Ultra HD color on input 3 for his Ultra HD Blu-ray player, and then he could separately send the audio to his AV receiver. Boom, problem solved for the Ultra HD Blu-ray player. For the Apple TV 4K, he could plug that into the HD Fury AVR Key, separate the audio and video. So now he could plug that into HDMI input number 4, activate the deep color, and separately send the audio to his AV receiver. That one solved. Then all of his SDR sources could plug into his AV receiver. The AV receiver plugs into HDMI port 2 with the deep color turned off. And therefore it doesn't mess up his Oppo Blu-ray player and his cable box anymore, because that Ultra HD color setting has been turned off for that. So that'll work, but what's going to happen if he gets another HDR source? He could plug that into HDMI number 1, but if it doesn't have a separate way of sending audio, he'd need another AVR key, or he'd need to use a switch between his Apple TV.
But he's not going to get the HDR then that he wants, though, right?
Oh yeah, he will through the AVR key, because it's separating the video and audio. So it's sending the HDR video straight to the TV. And the
straight
audio,
to the TV.
The audio gets separated. Yes. So the problem with trying to use the two HDMI outputs of the AV receiver, be they the mirrored outputs or the Zone 2, is that unfortunately the TV is also an audio device.
Right.
So whatever gets sent there has to be compatible with both the TV and the AV receiver, which in the case of the LG OLEDs is actually like totally fine for all Dolby sounds because it even goes all the way up to Atmos, but it doesn't work with DTS side of things, which of course his Oppo Region Free Blu-ray player, most of those are DTS HD audio, right?
Sure.
So yeah, I don't know what else. I mean, the other.
So $300 worth of HD Fury stuff is what you're recommending.
Well, 150 right now, because right now he only has one source. The Ultra HD Blu-ray player can do it itself.
He's going to send the video straight to the TV.
Yeah.
The audio to the receiver.
Yeah. Yeah. His HDR sources get their own inputs on the TV.
Right.
And then you're just using whatever HDMI inputs on the AV receiver. So, I mean, you can definitely make your Harmony do that. That's just switching inputs on your TV for those sources. But it's 100. So he was like, can I just use a splitter? Well, again, it's the audio problem. The TV is an audio device. And I tried, I'm like, is there a way to just completely shut off the TV's audio? And unfortunately, I checked on my own OLED. It's like, nope, you can make it so that no sound comes out of the internal speakers, but it's still going to try and either send it out of its optical port or out of ARC. So it's still acting as an audio sync device.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, dude. $150. That's the solution.
All right. Chris bought a new receiver, a Denon AVR X4300H. After about a month, he noticed this left front speaker, a Paradigm Atom, was buzzing. He ran a 20 to 300 hertz sweep and discovered it was damaged. 2 weeks later, the same thing happened to his right front speaker. The center speaker had the same kind of damage 6 years ago, but since he had bought 2 pairs back then and only used 3 of the 4 speakers for the LCR, he just swapped the spare. The speakers are 17 years old. So is this just a coincidence related to age, or should he be worried that something is wrong with the receiver and is causing the damage somehow? He's always had a subwoofer and cross the mains over 80 hertz, and he never listens above negative 10 dB from reference, so he doesn't think he did anything to break them. So what are our thoughts on that?
I think those are the ones that are old enough. They had foam surrounds.
Yeah, it does. That's exactly what it sounds like. It sounds like there's take a real close look at the surrounds.
That's the perimeter of your woofers. So it's the little whatever spongy thing they use to attach the cone of the woofer to the actual cabinet. There's some kind of spongy thing there. It might be rubber, but I think these ones used foam, and foam does break down over time.
These are 17-year-old speakers. The fact that it happened with a different receiver, years ago, it tells you right there that it's not your current receiver. Your current receiver. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I can't even think of what a receiver could do to do this, other than to play a sound so loud that it pops the tweeter, or something like that. It's
or
just
it could clip.
It could clip
and cause damage. But that would probably be your tweeter, not your woofer.
Right. So it's very unlikely that your receiver did the deed here, that this is just the age of your speakers coming into play. It just happens to be the same sound as before.
Yeah, you could get them refoamed. There are plenty of speaker repair shops that know how to refoam a woofer, so you could do that. That's my top suspect.
So no matter what, he needs new speakers, so he's trying out a whole bunch and hoping to find an LCR set for under $550. He managed to buy 2 pairs of the most recent Paradigm Atom speakers directly from Paradigm. He tried the Q Acoustics 3090 Center, but wasn't crazy about it and picked the Atom over it every time while listening blind. He's also got a Sony Core Series Center, an NHT Super Center Infrared Edition, as well as a pair of KEF Q100s and a pair of Def Tech Studio 45s. He's also thinking of auditioning ELAC Debut, SVS Prime, Hyperion Intimus, and Ascend SE series, mostly based on hearing us mention those brands many times. He figures out of all of these, he's bound to find something that he really likes and will fit his budget. But do we have any comments? Maybe a really impressive option he missed, or just something we think he should be aware of so that he makes his best decision? You got a lot of good speakers there, dude. I mean, let's be honest here.
I'm looking through that. I'm like, that I'm pretty sure that covers. I mean, maybe Focal Birds would be.
Yeah, that came to mind. And also our new when RBH starts shipping these new impression.
RBH impression, yeah.
Those are the only 2 that came to my mind. The stuff I would go, yeah, you might want to take a listen to those too. So it would be
all the other ones we'd normally suggest.
I know the Focal Birds would be good to listen to, and the impression series speakers when they come out at the end of the month. Those are the only 2 that are not on your list. If you can't find a speaker out of these that you like, something is you are picky.
There's something else going on, I mean, I would say easily try the SVSs and the Hyperions because they pay shipping both ways. Maybe RSL. I don't even know them, but they pay shipping both ways, so why not give them a try?
Yeah, it's a good idea too. Ryan on Facebook So the Dolby Surround Up Mixer in the Denon X8500H cannot use front wide speakers. After all, bummer, he
I
says.
agree, bummer.
That being the case, what do we think about foregoing surround backs altogether? In his case, he has 12 feet of space behind his primary listening position, but if he gives up surround backs, he could have 5 traditional speakers, front heights, top middles, rear heights, plus front wides for a 7.2.6 Atmos setup, but with front wides instead of surround backs. And then for up mixing, he could use DTS Neural X so that the front wides are active. Does that sound like a decent plan? Got 12 feet behind of space behind his primary listening space.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I am the biggest proponent for skipping front surround backs, and I'm like, I don't know if I would skip surround backs in this case. Okay, so what's in that 12 feet? Is there like a bar there, or like, you know what I mean? What is it? Just dead air back there? Because if it's dead air, having surround backs is actually pretty good. But if there's like, oh, there's a pool table back there, and there'll be people, you know, that's the kids' play area or something, and you know, maybe that place will be occupied while I'm maybe watching a movie, and you know, I won't ever want to have them loud enough so where I can actually hear them at my listening position.
I mean, this kind of boils down to, would you rather have front wides or surround backs? I mean, ultimately, that's sort of the question being asked.
I mean, you could try both of them, right?
Well, I know. I'm thinking he's probably like wiring, or maybe he wants to do in walls, so it's not going to be super easy to just try it.
Like, what's doing in walls, and the wides aren't a good option, anyways. If he's doing in walls, right?
Yeah, I mean, normally, I just look at how much space you have behind you, because if it's 5 feet or under, I'm probably going to say, you know what, go front wides instead of surround backs. But you got 12 feet. I would probably go with surround backs if it were me, and I'm like the only person who cares about front wides besides you.
I don't care about front wides.
Or Ryan. Besides Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan's the only other one that cares. You guys are like in the front wide. I'm gonna have to agree.
Could you, if it's just wiring, could you still just run wires to 9.2.6 so that the wires are there just in case? And because the thing is, with the X8500H, you actually have the option of physically connecting all 15. You can connect 9.2.6. You then just have to choose which 13 you're using for Atmos and which 11 you're using for the DTS formats. But you can physically connect all of them.
Yeah. I mean, one real, I think, definitive thing is that there's actual dedicated information that comes out of surround backs.
Yes. Yeah.
There is nothing that comes dedicatedly out of a
other than actual Atmos or actual DTS-X. The objects could steer sounds into the front wides.
Yes, but right now they generally don't. So there's a lot of cases to be made for surround backs that I usually discount as being unimportant. But in this case, I kind of feel like surround backs are the ways to go. But
yeah, okay. I'll say that, Ryan, gun to my head, your situation with the 12 feet behind you, I'm going surround backs instead of front wides. There's my answer.
Yeah. Tom W. Tom's room is 21.5 feet long, 14 feet wide, 7 feet 2 inches high. This is a basement, hopefully. He recently got a new 75-inch Samsung MU8000 TV. He also has an Apple TV 4K and a Sony X800 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. He has a 7.2 system with 5 DefTech speakers, 2 Speakercraft in-ceiling speakers as the surround backs. His receiver is an Marantz SR7005 that cannot pass 4K and doesn't do Atmos. For the time being, he has to plug his 4K sources directly into his TV. And in the case of his Apple TV 4K, that means he has to use ARC to get the audio back to the receiver, which means he's limited to 5.1 Dolby Digital. That is going to be a lossy format. So he's looking to replace his receiver, but he's getting resistance from his wife about the cost. He looked at accessories for less and figures he can probably afford to at least get something that will pass 4K and HDR, but when it comes to 9 or 11 speaker Atmos, he isn't so sure. Since he has a growing Ultra HD Blu-ray library now, he'd like to try Atmos. Given his room size and setup, do we think it's worth trying a setup with only 2 overhead speakers, or should he only consider it if he can find a way to afford a receiver that could deliver 4 overhead speakers? And which receiver should he buy? By all accounts, not mine, but by all accounts, 2 Atmos speakers are considerably better than, 4 Atmos speakers are considerably better than 2 Atmos speakers. So if you can get the 4 overhead speakers,
Yeah.
I think you kind of should go for it. And in the case of a theater that's as large as yours is, it really makes a lot of sense to well, I mean, you've got those surround back speakers, right?
Yeah, they're already in the ceiling. They're
Those
already
could
surround
be your
backs.
surround. You know, you don't have to buy
Your
the
top
top
rears.
rear. It's
Sure.
the surround backs, which makes more sense to call them that, anyways. Um, yeah, I'm gonna have to say go with the receiver that you can actually get. Uh, 9 point whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, I've been
7.
saying for a while now, if you're gonna do Atmos, I really feel quite strongly you want 4 overhead speakers. Now, I mean, I totally get it because I mean, yeah, you can get quite a few receivers now that'll do 5.2.2
Right.
for really affordable prices. So I totally understand how that's attractive, but you're locked to that, which means if you ever did want to go to 4 overhead speakers, you have to buy a whole new receiver again. Um, at the same time, gosh, I mean, he needs something to improve upon his current receiver.
Right. And the Denon X3300, that's only 7.2.2, is that right?
It's 5.2.2
Oh,
max.
5.2.2. And the 4300 is the one I have,
The
right?
4300 can do, I mean, that can actually do 11 speakers. It can do 7.2.4 if you add an external 2-channel amp to it.
Which
So
is what I
let's say
have.
he can't afford to get the amp right away. You could still do 5.2.4 right away,
Right.
just using its own built-in amps. And then in the future, if you can afford to add another 2-channel amp, you could go all the way to 7.2.4 with that.
How much are those costing these days?
So the 4300 now is up to $900 at Accessories for Less, but the sister model in Marantz's line, the SR6011, that's $750. That is the most affordable 9-channel receiver that can be expanded to 11 in the future. But $750, and I get it, that might just be too much money. So my real advice is I really want you to get that, because if you're going to do Atmos, I want you to have 4 overhead speakers. But I understand if you just can't and you just have to get something else that it can at least pass through 4K and stuff now.
Yeah. Should he keep the in-ceiling surround back speakers? Should he focus on getting 7.2.4, or would the 5.2.4 be enough? Well, I think 5.2.4 is much more feasible for you right now than 7.2.4.
And it would actually involve only adding 2 more
2
speakers to what you already have.
And I actually think that you might get a better overall experience just by changing those surround backs into top rears,
Yeah.
because they are quite literally top rears. I mean,
And,
that's what
and
they
you would
are.
always have the option then in the future to add actual surround backs, like either on stands or just mounted to your back wall.
Or maybe
And
never doing it, and which is
or
also
maybe never. Yeah. And then you add the 2-channel amp to that SR6011. So it gives you the ability to upgrade in the future without spending the money right now. And you could set up 5.2.4 right now, which is what I would do.
yeah. I have to scroll down. Sorry. If you were to install another pair of in-ceiling speakers, he's concerned about the bulkhead that runs the entire length of the room on the left side. The bulkhead is 3 feet wide, so if he installs speakers symmetrically while avoiding the bulkhead, he's concerned they'd be too close together. Should you consider mounting something like the Focal Little Birds instead? So I'm looking at this picture here. I'm trying to. So it ran the whole room, but you have surround backs that are in your ceiling.
I know, and we can't see where those surround backs actually are unless those still look like lights that are directly above his seat. It's very difficult to tell.
I'm not seeing them either. So
but regardless,
look at the line of your left and right speakers.
Yeah.
Okay, it should follow that line, and that's inside your bulkhead. So I don't
sure
see
looks like you can. And I mean, he said the room was 14 feet wide. So if it's a 3-foot wide bulkhead and you subtract 3 feet on the other side too to keep it symmetrical, that's still 8 feet in between. Now, obviously, there's some width to the speaker itself, so it's not actually going to be like the centers are 8 feet apart, but they're going to be 7 feet apart.
I think that's fine.
That doesn't seem too close to me at all. So I think you could, whatever was done in your current surround backs, maybe they're much closer together. I don't know.
If they're much closer together, scoot them out. He's got a drop. He's got a
drop tile ceiling.
Drop tile ceiling. Anyways, just move that tile over so that's on the outside. Because
I think having the speakers like basically close to the bulkhead and then symmetrical on the other side, but they'll be 7 feet apart, center on center, and they'll more or less be in line with your front, left, and right speakers, which is exactly what you want anyway.
I think that's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Andrew on Facebook. Andrew is using a Denon AVR X3300W. He's noticed that if you place a 2-channel source, there's a drastic volume level difference. If he uses a surround sound upmixing listening mode versus just using stereo listening mode, he figures the surround sound listening modes are about 10 dB louder. If there's some setting he can adjust so that the volume levels are closer to even. In most Denon receivers, they have a 2-channel stereo mode that's completely unique compared to, like, you can even change the trim levels on your speakers based on that 2-channel listening mode. My thought here is that something has gone awry, and that when you have that setting needs to be adjusted. So,
well, I don't know. I mean, it might just be the fact that all of his speakers are playing when he goes into surround sound.
Yeah, but 10 dB, dude, is insane. That's like that's a lot.
It might also be 9 more speakers than in the 2-channel listening mode.
That's true. We don't know how many
utterly impossible. Yeah. Oh, I guess no, it couldn't be in this case. It'd be 5 more speakers, X3300, so 7 speakers max. Yeah. No, I mean, the solution would be that separate 2-channel listening mode. You go in there and readjust the settings for that.
Yeah. That's what
I think of anything else.
I can't think of it. So check that out.
So it's under the manual speaker settings. There is a separate stereo sub menu within that, which only applies to the stereo listening mode. Water break. Bad timing.
I didn't think that you were done talking. You usually are much more long-winded than that. Okay, Nick. We're almost done. Nick would we're almost, I mean, I'm almost done. Nick would like to upgrade to an HDR capable projector, but he has concerns. He does not replace his displays very often. He was happy to use his Pioneer Plasma right up until now, when there are finally displays that genuinely offer something new and improved. But it almost feels as though HDR and projectors is still in the early adopter phase. Do we think that within the next year or two, things will finally solidify in terms of HDR formats and support? Should he wait for there to be a clear understanding of how HDR is going to work on projectors, or should he just bite the bullet and invest in the Epson, Sony, or JVC projector in the near future?
It's a good question.
My sense is that your gut is correct, and that you should hold off for right now. If this is something that you don't do very often, I feel like projectors are still in a state of flux, and we're going to see some real, maybe not totally substantive changes, but we're going to see in the next year or two projectors prices coming to the place where Rob and I are saying, this is the one, this is the one, this is the one. We're not there yet. No. You know, we're not there
quite
yet.
There yet. Yeah.
And the feature sets, I think, are still a little bit, they're a little bit in the, when a new HDMI comes out and like 2 of your HDMI inputs will have the new one and all the rest of the old ones, that's where I feel like projectors are in their feature set right now. We're still a couple of months or a year or so away from really seeing, hey, this is the feature set that they can do, and now everybody's coming out with it, because that's the thing that's most competitive. I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, I think a big clue to me was Epson's lineup, because that 5040 UB that they have, which is HDR compatible, and that they didn't refresh for this year, and I'm like, they probably will next year, or like at the end of this year, and it might have a whole new thing, because one of the limitations there is that it can't do 4K HDR at 60 hertz.
Right.
That's one of the limitations. And I was expecting that to be the one lone feature that got added at the very end of last year or at the beginning of this year, but didn't happen. They're just like, nope, that model's continuing over. Yeah. So I have to agree with you. I think projectors are still, when it comes to HDR, they are still sort of in an early adopter phase. And I do think within a year or two, we'll start to see this settle out a little bit more. If you can wait, I think that is a good idea. I'm really hoping it actually becomes something very similar to what I mentioned with like what LG is doing with their active HDR, where instead of trying to map potentially 10,000 nit metadata down to the abilities of a projector, just have the projector itself analyze the signal and tone map itself, rather than trying to adhere to what flat panels are doing with tone mapping, because it doesn't work for projectors. It's not applicable. So, yeah.
He says if all the HDR formats continue to coexist, but some content remains available only in one or two HDR formats out of the group, do we think there'll be some sort of cross conversion available? For example, HDR projectors today only accept HDR10 and sometimes HLG. If it comes across content that is only in Dolby Vision or only in HDR10 plus or only in Technicolor Advanced HDR, is that even still a thing? Or some other HDR format, will it be possible to convert any and all content back down to HDR10 so that his projector can understand it? I still think that they use HDR10 basically as the base of everything, don't they? And everything else is sort of metadata on top of that.
I mean, weirdly, there was the example of, say, Voodoo's earliest HDR content was it was in Dolby Vision and it wasn't on top of HDR10.
That's weird.
But that was early on. Now they've updated their library so that everything is HDR10 and then some of it has Dolby Vision on top of it. The real idea that pretty much the whole industry has agreed to now is that HDR10 is there no matter what. And then if there's any additional formats, they'll be on top of an HDR10 base layer. I mean, I guess I can't promise you that all content will do that, but that really seems to be the wide idea. Yeah. HLG is somewhat of an exception, but right when they formulated HLG, they actually said, well, there's actually a pretty simple HLG to HDR10 conversion process.
Right.
So that's
like
supposed
a lookup
to be
table, right?
Yeah, so that's supposed to be built into any cable boxes because HLG is really just about live broadcasts. Mm-hmm. That's really the only place they're talking about using it. Live TV, where how do you add the metadata? Because it's live. It's just going out there live. So it'll be like your cable box, or I guess your ATSC 3.0 television at some point. If all the television understands is HDR10, those should have an HLG to HDR10 converter built into whatever the playback device is, because that's supposed to be a pretty simple conversion. So if you were to buy a projector soon, very soon, and it only understands HDR10, you should be quite safe. That's the answer. You should be quite safe.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see. I really don't see HDR10 going, that somebody coming out with a new format that's like, yep, it's only going to work on very specific, they're going to use or have it be so that HDR10 can be converted or gleaned from what they're giving off. So,
because he was saying like if you look at the Apple TV 4K and the iTunes content, a lot of that only mentions Dolby Vision, but you can set the Apple TV 4K to output HDR10, and then even when it's getting Dolby Vision, it outputs HDR10.
Right.
So, yeah.
All right. Jay needs a new subwoofer to replace his failing Sunfire True subwoofer Mark II. He's running a 2.1 system that includes TV audio. The room is 25 by 20 by 10 with a tapered ceiling. I guess it's a family room that is open to the kitchen, so it's probably somewhere in the range of 7 bajillion cubic feet. 7,000
cubic feet or so.
The mains are Magnapan 10 QRs, whatever those are, and he's trying to limit the size of the sub to please his wife, so he's looking mostly at sealed models with a budget of $1,500. He's considering the Klipsch R something for
115.
115.
That's really such a hard number.
I'm getting very tired. $900 for this one. It's a 19.5 by 21.5 by 24.5. It's the largest acceptable size.
I bet you that's actually bigger than your wife. You might be looking at those numbers. That's a big sub, dude.
You do not. You build a box and ask your wife if this box, if this cardboard box, if this was actually a subwoofer, where could I put this in the room? And if she says outside of the house, then you'll know that it's too big.
That's a big box.
HSU Research ULS15 Mark II, which is 860 shipped. It's an 18-inch cube.
Mm-hmm.
Power Sound Audio S1500. It's $1,000, 18 by 17 by 17.5 or 1/4. I don't think that you have made a box. That's what I believe, because I think that Klipsch is about the same size as that Epic, not Epic, the EP500 sub that I used to have, and that thing is a monster.
Well, that's bigger than your EP500. Yeah. The EP500 was only 15 inches wide.
Is it really? I thought it was 17.
No.
Yeah, this is a very, very big sub.
Oh, that's big. That Klipsch is big.
Yeah. What do I think? I think that you need to really build the box and then decide go with your wife and talk to her about it and decide on what you're going to get. You're never going to compress this room and or compress it, but to fill this room.
Oh no, you wouldn't want to pressurize it.
You
Open to
wouldn't
the
want to
kitchen.
pressurize
It's gonna
it.
be
It's too much.
unpleasant if you did.
It's too much. So what you would like to do is get a sub that either is small enough that you can put close to where you're sitting, so that you get a little bit more of that tactile sensation, or is just acceptable enough so that your wife will be happy with it, which is a very important part of this. I don't want to belittle this point. If your wife is listening, hey, listen up. Your opinion is very valid, and it's important that it's respected. I think you should be looking at the cylinder subs.
Yes, that was my thought too.
Because I think you can dress those things up, especially now that they have wooden tops. You can dress those things up to look like pedestals and stuff, and they look kind of. I mean, they could go into. We don't have a picture of his room, so depending on your decor, they may fit right in, or they may stick out like a sore thumb. We've seen people surround them in, white cloth or paper. You could drape fabric over them if you wanted to, as long as it's breathable fabric and it doesn't
interfere with the ports.
Interfere with the ports in any way, shape, or form. You could do a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for the size of the room, and because I figure floor space is important here, I was like PC 12 plus.
Yeah, that would work.
It's $1,200. It won't pressurize 7,000 cubic feet, but it'll handle this room size pretty darn nicely. I mean, out of the SVS lineup in a sealed format, the SB4000 is $1,500, but it's 18 by 18 by 21. It's not small either. For a sealed sub, that's big.
That's
but hey,
big old sealed sub.
Even the HSU is an 18-inch cube, but the SB4000 is even larger and it's much more expensive. If you were to go out of one of the ones that you already mentioned, I would go with the HSU. I'd go with the ULS 15. First of all, it's the cheapest. 18-inch cube is kind of reasonable, but more than that, you could get two of them because it's $1,500 for a pair. Now there's actually shipping on top of that, so I guess you wouldn't be wholly under $1,500. But if you could somehow skirt the shipping cost as just being a tacked on expense, $1,500 could get you two of them. You could put them on either side of your couch. They could be your end tables, and they'd be fantastic.
Good luck.
I'd either go cylinder. I'd go SVS cylinder, the PC12 Plus, or I'd go the HSU.
That's a good luck situation right there. Try getting two of those things in there. Good luck. What time do we have? We got. How long is this? It's just so many words.
It's not.
Why are there so?
It's two separate
words?
questions, so you can stop. You have a pause.
All right, here. I gotta scroll up to the top. You just you have to wait. Nathan. Last week, we talked about JVC's instructions for adjusting the settings on some of their projectors for HDR. We also talked about Oppo's strip metadata feature that's built into their Ultra HD Blu-ray players. In addition to the built-in settings on JVC projectors, is it possible to use external software that updates the projectors via their Ethernet connection? JVC has their own projector calibration software, but it's also possible to use third-party software, including a program called AV Tool that allows a user to create a custom tone map. Some people have taken to sharing custom curves, and if you have the ability to measure using calibration equipment or hire someone who does, you can create tone mapping curve that is unique to your setup. Do we think this method would deliver superior results versus just relying on what JVC has programmed versus the metadata plus the metadata in the content? So am I to believe that you can now use third-party software to upload custom curves to the JVC? Is that what I'm?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of a hack because they do have their own projection calibration software that was mostly to tune the color tuning in that.
Right.
But people discovered, hey, you can actually, write your own software that'll use the same interface, and then you can go in there and you can adjust the lookup tables and the tone map and everything. Which can get you in a bit of trouble if you don't know what you're doing.
That's exactly. Now, let me say, if you are a professional calibrator, and you know what you were doing, I think this is a fine thing to do. If you are not one of those people, you should just back away slowly and don't ever touch those things again. Let me explain something to you, son. When I was going through many of my classes for THX calibration, the video calibration thing, one of the things that was a constant reminder was if you're going into the the settings menu. I'm not talking about the settings that are on the TV that you can adjust on the TV, or there's always a way to go back to default. Right.
Sure.
But if you go into the user menus, like the ones
the
that
service menus,
the ones that you have to sometimes go up to the TV and press a sequence of buttons to make them pop up.
It really is like a hidden code that's given out to professional calibrators. It's not for end users.
They are like, never make a change until you write something down. You got to write everything down. You got to know, because once you screw this up, it is impossible to get it back. You are going to completely hose yourself. So, do I think this is a good idea? Absolutely not. I don't. For 90% of the time, 99% of the time, I think this is a terrible idea that people should never do. But if you're a professional calibrator, it's probably something that you can do. I would venture to say that most of them don't, and probably wouldn't. They would just do whatever JVC does, and because that's what the whole point of
because this is a totally unlicensed third-party piece of software that. It lets you access the things you don't normally have access to. That's kind of cool. But a lot of licensed calibrators won't touch a thing like that.
Yeah.
That's not... Yeah.
I don't really think this is a great idea.
No, that said, in theory, what you can do is really actually kind of similar to what I'm hoping projector manufacturers start doing automatically themselves.
Right.
And what you would do is literally you just put in each signal level along that PQ curve. Here's the signal. We know how many nits that's supposed to be by the standard, but we know that when you put that in a projector, first of all, instead of 0 to 100 actually being 0 to 100, you probably want it to be 0 to 50 in a projector. And then everything above that, you probably max out at, let's say, 130, 140 nits on a projection setup. That's probably the very max. And if you're going all the way along the PQ curve, that needs to map all the way from what would be 10,000 nits peak, has to fit now into 130 or 140 or something. But you could do that manually by literally just putting in each value along the PQ curve, all 1,024 steps along it, and then saying, here's how much light should actually come out of this projector in response to that. So I'm hoping projectors start doing that automatically by analyzing the signal themselves and tone mapping that way. This is a way to do it manually. In theory, I'm not against that. I don't think this is something the vast majority of users should touch. Of course, there's going to be the people on AVS Forum who get into this and start sharing the custom curves. And if you want to go down that road, I'm saying do so with extreme caution.
I would never trust some custom curve I got off of AVS Forum. I am sorry, dude. I am sorry. These, they could be in a room that has light reflecting, some sort of colors reflecting on their screen from the light in the room, and it just, I would never trust it. You do what you're gonna do, but it would not me, man. Lastly, he says Oppo's latest beta firmware for the 203 and 205 includes 4 new options for HDR to SDR conversion. For HDR to SDR conversion, they're essentially different tone mapping options. I think it's SDR to HDR conversion.
No, this is HDR to SDR. This is taking HDR signal and converting it down to SDR.
Why would you? Okay, anyways, different tone mapping options. Plus, they have sliders that let you select the peak light output. Some beta testers, including Chris Deering from Sun Vision, have claimed they're getting excellent results by leaving their projectors in SDR mode and having the Oppo players convert any HDR content to SDR instead, but using these HDR to SDR conversion options so that all of the HDR detail is still retained without the overall image looking too dim. We agree that this might be the best solution for projectors. It's actually more in line with what Joe Kane has been advocating, saying that we ought to retain the flexibility of using gamma rather than having hard-coded light output values the way the PQ curve demands. I mean, maybe. My first reaction to anything that says turn off the feature I bought the projector for so that you can get better, it makes me question whether or not that's actually the thing to do. I mean, because basically what you're saying is turn off HDR, the high dynamic range, use SDR, the standard dynamic range, but then add the tone mapping into the SDR signal so that you're getting, I don't know. I don't get it.
The other potential issue with this is when you go into, if you're using an SDR mode, so the projector is saying, hey, I'm just getting an SDR signal, you're not getting wide color at that point.
I just don't understand why this would be something that somebody would want to do.
So this is different from the strip metadata feature.
Right. Where you're
Because
still getting HDR at that
yeah,
point.
in the strip metadata is still sending the PQ curve. It's
Right.
just not sending the HDR10 metadata that says the peak light output within this HDR curve for the entire movie is 4,000 nits, and then the
Right.
average light output is 60 nits. You're not getting that metadata, so it's just getting the PQ curve. That's all the projector is receiving, and then it's saying, all right, I'm going to try and fit that entire PQ curve into what I can do.
Right.
And then when you set your contrast and brightness levels, you've essentially set 0 to 10,000, but you can adjust that so that it actually looks correct, so that the 0 to 50 range, which is what you care about, or the 0 to 100 range within the signal, which is what you care about most, doesn't look too dim overall. And then everything else within that PQ curve fits within the entire capability of the projector. So strip metadata is different than converting the HDR to SDR. So I love that it has this, because there was already the one HDR to SDR setting that they had, and all that let you do was set the peak light output level.
Mm-hmm.
So which for my 1080p SDR TV worked out pretty good, because I tend to watch my TVs at around 150 nits peak instead of 100. And that's one of the options in the Oppo.
Okay.
And if you leave it at the default in the Oppo, which is 300 nits, which is way brighter than I like to watch, but some people do, then the whole image comes out looking too dark, because it's saying, oh, peak was 300, so now everything just gets shifted within a range that doesn't work for my TV. My TV isn't going up to 300. I turned down to 150 and it looks about right for me. But this is giving you more options. It's giving you different options so that, let's say the peak brightness is 4,000 or 10,000 or something.
Right.
That requires different tone mapping. So it's great that they have these 4 different options. I'm all for that, for when you're connecting it to a 1080p TV. But yeah, you're giving up the wide color to do this. Which is the whole point of the strip metadata. The strip metadata was like, well, yeah, you might lose the HDR tone mapping, but you retain the wide color.
Mm.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think the features are for what they're for. I'd rather keep the wide color.
Yeah, you see, I've always had this sense when you read something like this, where I look at it and go, that just doesn't make any sense. Why would anyone even do that? And this doesn't. It happens in a lot of different ways. Like, and I've heard people, whenever they're like, oh, I bought this subwoofer and I shoved socks in all the ports.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, why? Oh, because I wanted to seal.
Sub.
I wanted it to be a sealed sub. I'm like, but why? Why didn't you buy a sealed sub if you wanted the sealed sub? Why did you take this sub and make it into a sealed sub when there's no evidence that the manufacturer ever wanted that to happen? And my thought here is, I want to be special. I want to do something that no one else is doing, and then claim that it's somehow superior. And I can do that by shoving socks in my subwoofer.
Well, in this case, I can see how. I mean, particularly, let's take the new DLP 4K projectors,
Sure.
the $1,500 ones. They don't do wide color anyway.
Sure.
So I could see how this very well might end up looking better than saying strip the metadata and it still can't really do HDR fully.
Right.
And it can't do the wide color anyway, so what are you retaining? So why don't you just have the player convert it to really well tone mapped SDR? And
Sure.
that very well could look better. I can see a use case for this for sure on a projector.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it becomes so. It's the same thing with the sock and the subwoofer, right? It's like, okay, they took a subwoofer that was never meant to be sealed. They sealed it up and they put it in a very small room. And they're like, it sounds great. I'm like, well, okay, that could be true, right? But try to take that sub and put it into a room it was really meant to be in, and you've sealed up all the ports, and you're going to damage the sub because of it. In this case, there's no damage, obviously, that could possibly be happening.
No.
But there could be damage to your viewing image, meaning that you could have done this, and yes, you're telling yourself it looks better, but in fact, you're missing out on wide color because of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't think that. I would, with a grain of salt, I take this advice. In specialized situations like what Rob was describing, I take this advice. But in general, I'd be like, I don't know. It's the same thing when people are like, I turned off Odyssey and it sounds so much better. I'm like, no,
No,
it
I mean
doesn't.
what I love about Oppo is they're thinking about all the edge use cases that
Sure, they
nobody
are.
else is thinking about, and they're putting
Yeah,
the features
yeah.
in there for the real enthusiasts who are like, hey, is this a thing that could be done? And Oppo's like, yeah, I think we could do that.
We could
You
probably
know?
shoehorn that in there.
You know, and it's like, who else is doing that? Nobody else is doing that.
Right.
So that's awesome. That's really cool.
I do agree with you on that one. Oppo
Yeah.
does make sure that their consumers are taken care of as far as what they're getting. And I agree. It's important that we have these options out there so that somebody can mess around with it. So I have something to talk about in this podcast. So that's going to be the podcast for tonight. We got a couple of questions left over. Who we got?
Yes, we have Jeb. We have Justin Not Bieber, who wrote to us on Facebook like he often does. Ted got back to us. He tried our suggestions, so we're gonna be grasping at some more straws for Ted. And then we have Charleston, who was our final question for this week. So that was it. We'll answer you, gentlemen, on the podcast next week.
Okay, so I just scrolled down to see if Ted actually had any success, and it looks like it wasn't all.
Nope.
No success. It looked like something had an effect. He said something
One
had
an effect. It wasn't a good effect.
Oh, jeez. All right, Ted, you're going to get a young priest and an old priest. There's an Exorcist TV show. I just found this the other day. I started watching it. It's not bad.
Oh, yeah. The first season is actually quite good. I liked it. The second season has been, what
I've only gotten through one episode, so it's been okay so far.
All
right. This is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. It's going to be the podcast for today.
Going to thank our listeners of the week, though.
Oh, we got to thank our listeners of the week. We're going to thank Christopher for going to www.avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. And we want to thank our 54 patrons over at Patreon who are donating monthly, including Niels. So thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Niels. And thank you, 53 other patrons.
Yeah, Christopher, thanks so much for the donation via PayPal. To our 54 patrons, thank you so much. Niels, thanks for signing up.
And Jeb, we want to thank you for talking us up to Accessories for Less. So thank you, Jeb.
Yeah, Jeb, thanks so much. Enjoy those products. I will gladly take the blame for costing you all that money. Good stuff.
All right, for AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.